So previous video, we learned how to build journeys and game systems. So now the next thing would be to figure out how to define milestones and set milestones, and also how to define our sprints, or as runs, we call them runs. So that's how we would proceed. So yeah, let's start with milestones. Can you show me how we deal with those in Codecks?
Yeah, absolutely. So last time we already set up the journeys and so on. So the state that we are in is that we have modded a very limited scope just for educational purposes, and a limited amount of work tasks. So the problem with game development is that time is a factor, and we want to ship at some point, ideally before budget runs out. So this is where we use milestones and runs. So milestones, or let me jump into the timeline view. So where you would play around with this is in the timeline view. And at the top, I see kind of a calendar timeline. And at the bottom, I will see the milestone or run that I'm working with. Let's start with milestones. So I click here on this calendar view, and then I can add a milestone to any of these dates. So let's say we want to have a milestone in March, and we call it alpha. And then a couple of months later, we want to have beta. And then a couple of months later, we have early access, for example. Of course, there are live service games and so on. There are different ways in which you can model this, but this is a simple example. You will see now the milestones appear here at the top, where I can scroll through. You can also, by the way, change in the settings kind of the scale of this top timeline. So let's say we have the alpha here. You can see it's empty at the moment, of course. So what I can do is I can go in here and say, I'm going to use bulk selection here. And then I can assign a milestone here. Now you can see by this icon here that they have been assigned. And now when I go to the milestone view, I can see both of these cards have been added to this scope for this milestone. You can also access the milestones in this way by opening the properties panel and going to this area. And from here, I could switch it to beta or early access very conveniently. I also get like a small pop-up about the workload that is already waiting for me in that milestone. You can also even just click on the milestone here and also change it from here, from the quick settings. So you don't need to have the properties panel open to access that. So what's important to understand about the timelines, about the milestone, is this milestone is associated with a specific day, in this case in 23 work days. So it is the best way of using, or the use case that we have in mind for milestones is something like a deliverable. So something that you want to release on Steam or another platform, or maybe a publisher milestone internally where you have a contractual obligation to finish certain assets by a certain time, or release a demo, for example. And for those, you have a specific date, a contractual date, a Steam Next Fest, a release date that you have announced. And for those cases, it's great to create a milestone and collect really all the cards that are relevant for that. By all cards, I would recommend focusing on the hero cards. I could add all the sub cards that are also necessary for this hero card, but I personally have the preference to just focus on the hero cards, because it's a nicer look, or it's a nicer overview to have 10 hero cards in here, and knowing, for example, let's say by that milestone, we also want to have the leaderboard ready. So I can also assign it like this, and then when I go back, you will see it's here. So I know when I look at this milestone, I know okay, these are the top 3 priorities. I don't need to bother with all the subcards. I think where I would put the subcards is inside of runs, as we call them. So yes, runs are like sprints, but we like to use a bit playful metaphors. And it's called run because it's inspired by a dungeon run. And the word sprint is strongly associated with Scrum, of course, and it comes with certain ideas around sprints and a certain cadence and certain rituals that you do, like the sprint planning and the sprint review and the a backlog pruning and retrospectives and all of that. But there, even outside of those rituals, there's a advantage in just having like the cyclical work cadence. So we wanted to represent that. So that's why we stepped away from the word sprint. And what we have here is kind of more just a work cadence. You can use it as a sprint in the sense of Scrum, but you can also just use it to manage your workload a bit easier. And the way you set them up is, again, you click on the calendar and then you click on Setup Run. And here you should enter a short name. What is, let's say, okay, CE. This is, I can set the duration of each run. Let's say 2 weeks is a good default. We want to start.
Is there any best practice around duration?
I prefer 2 weeks, but it's generally I would say, well, it's really no. I can say. I was just going to say during the experimental concepting phase, maybe you want to have shorter iteration cycles or like during the pre-production, because you are creating a lot of prototypes, and I think you should aim at keeping prototypes short and minimalistic. So it makes sense. Maybe you cannot plan too far ahead because you don't know kind of what you're doing. You're experimenting, you're exploring different areas and so on. So also having so if you would say, let's only speak to each other, or let's have a planning meeting every 4 weeks. I mean, that can be fine, but in my experience, the tendency is to have shorter duration cycles at the start of the project and then longer maybe during production. And then towards the end of production, when you get close to shipping, then you would probably have shorter again, because then you have to make those hard decisions about scope and so on. A good general rule is 2 weeks. It's a good starting point. And we can also define, so these runs will keep going on forever until stopped. I can also edit here the number of next upcoming runs. It should already create in advance. This does not mean that, for example, this run will stop after 4 runs. It just means the interface will show me the next 4 cycles. Once I've concluded the current one, it will create and keep creating additional cycles. Let's say, okay, 4. And now you will see it's part of this timeline here. I can see kind of how it fits to each week, and I can see 4 have been created here. And now I can use these as container as like everything else. So let's say I'm going into the code tasks and I think, well, let's do all of the code tasks in the first 2 weeks the first run. And let's also do all of the runs in this next run. You can see the icon here. Again, I just use the bulk edit. Another way to do that is to use the properties window. Let's say, oh no, we're too busy for this run already. Let's do it in run 2. I can use this functionality. Again, also I can just click on the icon here, move it again to run 3. So there are different ways. I can also use the keyboard shortcut. I can use comma on the keyboard, and then I can enter the run even without touching the mouse. So what this does, if I go back to the timeline, I will find my cards in here. The cards that I selected for this run. And that's the setup I would recommend, which is, like I said, milestones are for hero cards, runs are for work cards. But the system is pretty flexible. You can also add your hero cards to your runs if you kind of want to focus on specific game entities in a certain week and you want to keep them around for a reference. You can do that as well. And you can also add work tasks to milestones. For example, it might sense if you are creating a important trailer for your game and you want to create a milestone for the trailer deliverable and you want to track a lot of floating marketing cards that are about like smaller things and so on, you can also just throw all of them into one milestone. That can also work.
One last thing, when you hover over the milestone or over the run, there is a progress dashboard that appears. Can you explain briefly to me what it indicates or what I should pay attention to there?
Yeah, you should pay attention to everything, but it gives you a quick preview or important information, how many workdays are left, what is the name of it. I can give the milestone a title. I can even add an image. You can access more functionality by using the sideboard here, and so which you can enable with this button here. And then I will get a burn up chart, which every productivity nerd knows, of course. Burn up charts are way better than burn down charts because they give you a better idea about the scope changes. And it will show me the amount of cards, how many are done, how many are in review. This progress bar will fill here depending on how much effort has been done. So a lot of stuff. What's also really cool is you can even track the workload by team members. So I can go in here and say, let's say I can do like a effort of 3 and the rest of the team as well. I can save this and it will show me here kind of who is overworked or who has too many tasks, who needs like where we need to reschedule stuff, and who has more availability for additional tasks. In this case, of course, it's trivial, but when you have a bigger team, those sprints can involve a lot of people. And you might be tracking, especially on a longer time frame, you might be tracking 100 cards for a single sprint. And in that case, just having an overview and something that the project manager can look at and at first glance tell, okay, these people are overworked, can be really helpful. And since we're already in the sidebar, you can also add a description here and say, we're starting a new game. So you can add fun stuff here. It will show up on the top. The idea is, of course, that you add explanatory stuff. So you can add here, in this case, for this specific run cycle. So I can add, hey, on this run, we are going to focus on certain characters. Let's focus on Julien and Ada Lovelace. You can add other information here. Maybe you have something like different project managers. You can note here who is responsible or who's owning this specific run and things like that. You can link to a publisher deliverable document by your publisher, so you can have that in mind. Or you can add just fun stuff here like lore and so on. You can also add screenshots here. And similarly, the same can go for the milestone. Here it's maybe even more relevant. So for the alpha milestone, you could add a description, for example, what does it even mean for a entity to be in alpha state? You can add kind of like a quick list, a quick reference that people can always look at in context why they're looking at the milestone. They can also look at the description, what this milestone is for, how we should think about it, and so on.
There's one last thing we should perhaps mention is that it happens from time to time that you push tasks to a next run and sometimes it slips the cracks and you maybe forget about it, but you thought of a very good solution. Can you share a bit more about that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's just theoretical because obviously it never happens to me that I forget about stuff.
Never.
But we have a beast mode feature, and yeah, okay. So this idea that that cards are not done by the end of the run, it happens. It might happen due to various reasons. Maybe you are overtasked, or the requirements for something is unclear, or some information or person was unavailable, and so on. So in that moment, you can not use this feature, and then the task will just remain in the old run, and you can then go in and clean up. But if you want a bit to have more fun with it and a bit more automation, you can use this beast mode feature. And here you can say, let me just enable it. So what happens when you enable beast mode is it ramps, or it heightens kind of the stakes of doing the run, because now you're enabling a mode where you are committing to actually doing these tasks. So you will see here, all the cards are shown as new, which means they have been newly committed. They have become part of the scope that we are committing for. Why they are showing this new label, I can still move them around. So if I feel, oh no, looking at this and looking at the total scope, I think this is way too much. So I will move this to another run, and that's fine as well. So the idea is, if a card is not done by the end of the run, we have automation here that allows you to move it over automatically. You can say only undone cards should be moved over. You can say also in review cards should be moved over, and so on. So you're pretty free to customize this. So yeah, the beast mode is a feature that I really love in Codecks, because it's representative of kind of what we stand for, which is finding playful metaphors for real production problems. So the beast mode, I can access it through here, and I can customize it to the grace period, and I will explain that in a second. But the idea is that when a card that you committed to or that you said this will be done by the end of the run is not done by the end of the run, and it moves out of the run again into the next run, it will increment in beast level. So what I mean by that is, here we set up an example. So you will see this card. It was initially committed to the previous week. It didn't get to done in that week. The estimate was changed, either by being automatically moved to the next run at the end of the run, or by me manually going in and moving it. And in that case, the system says, wait a moment, we're gonna increase the beast level here. And I can see this is a beast level 1. And with every time this happens, every time I don't meet the estimate that I aimed for, it will increase another level. So it's kind of a playful way or fun way of representing that. But it's also a actual production concern, right? If you have a lot of delays in your process, in your pipelines, in your journeys, and so on, this will cause a problem in the long run. So you want to know about it, just to have a discussion about it and clarify, why is this card not making progress? Is there maybe some uncertainty? Is the card not specific enough, and so on? And let's say I can time travel to next week, and I'm going to do the sound, or I have time now. I'm going to just set it to done. You can see the beast dies here. It's dead. It's gray now, as the eyes are crossed out. And I will look. I can still see, this was level 1 and so on. So the information is still there, but it won't increase in beast mode anymore. And so there are different ways you can capture this information or use this information. You can filter by beast cards. You can sort by beast cards if you want to see kind of the cards that are most dragging behind the intended timeline, and so on. So it's quite useful. And the way you use it is by clicking here. And what you can also find in here is this grace period. So this, when somebody, let's say, somebody adds a card to the run while it was already going, we want to give you a grace period where you can still disagree with that and move the card away from that run before it you officially commit to actually doing it. And this is what we call the grace period. So right now, for example, it's set up that if somebody adds a card to my run, whoever it might be, a colleague or a lead or something, and I disagree with that, I'm committing to this new workload, I have 24 hours to move the card away again, and without this beast penalty. The cards where this is the case are marked with a new label at the bottom. This will tell you, okay, this is a card that's still not locked in. It's still in this grace period, or it's still to be seen as a suggestion for a scope change. Of course, if there are scope changes, also you will see them also in this burn up chart. You will see that the top line will go up instead of down.
So long story short, if you procrastinate, Abyss will come and bite off a limb. Hence, Ria doesn't have a leg, I don't have toes. We're all bitten off. Fair warning.
Pretty hardcore here.
Cool. Well, we went through the milestones, we went through the runs, through the beast mode. So we have all of that compiled, which is great. Next video, we'll talk about the vision board. We'll talk about how you can make use of it to brainstorm, to build smart dashboards, to do big picture planning. So there's still some stuff to go through. Cool. See you then.
Absolutely. Yeah. Looking forward to it.